Welcome back to the Hodcast, the place where conversation meets construction training meets everything life. I absolutely love all the conversations that we have, but this one is incredible. I have the one and only Rupert Bates on the show today, having a conversation about all things construction, house building, and yes, you guessed it, barbecues. Rupert is the co-owner and director and editor of WhatHouse Magazine, which you can get, of BBQ Magazine, which you can also get, and he's an absolute legend in hosting the WhatHouse Awards every single year. At the time of filming, they were only 3 days ago, so there'll still be people, I'm sure, smelling of stale alcohol from in the background. Please grab your best brew, or if you're driving, be very careful and listen very carefully and obey the roads. But please, please, please listen carefully to this, because this is one of the best that we have had. Sit back, relax, enjoy. Rupert, if you could tell the entire construction industry one truth about the future of building, what would it be?
Gosh, that's quite a big question, because the future should be golden, because you've got a government pledging 1.5 million new homes, so surely that should play into the house builders' hands. But at the moment, there's huge uncertainty around that. So I think there's a massive opportunity, but got to get the ducks in the row, because they are still struggling, particularly SMEs. But they've got a great passion for what they do, and if only we could clear the path somehow, get planning sorted, get politics out of the way, I think the future is really bright.
Okay. Well, for context, for the people watching or listening to this, we're recording this the day before, so the 25th of November, the day before the budget goes out. So whatever we say now could be, we could be all be living in the, I don't know, some major recession come tomorrow. But who knows? Who knows? Yeah. Hopefully we'll talk about it later, the idea of the conversations that you're having around this, especially with SMEs, because we sat in the coffee shop earlier and talked about the fact that you were having conversations with SMEs that were saying they were struggling, and we'll move on to that a little bit later. But before we get there, we love to get an origin story, and I really am desperate for your origin story. For those watching and listening, you are not a bricklayer. I'm sure you're competent when it comes to DIY and home skills, and
not at all.
Fair. Well, that sets us in really good stead then. So if anyone's watching expecting bricklaying tips or anything like that, a fair few people who could give you that. But you're a journalist by name and nature. Yep. Where did your journey start in journalism? And we talk about mentorship in here. Who first sort of opened that door for you?
It actually goes back, my origin story in terms of journalism. Yeah, it goes back a long way as a teenager. I actually grew up in West Berkshire near Newbury. My next door neighbour was a senior executive on the Daily Telegraph. And he said, you need to serve your time on a local paper. So literally I was T-boy on the Newbury Weekly News in West Berkshire. And that's really where I started. So I went there, I was doing anything from golden wedding anniversaries to Beaujolais Nouveau days, which were great, which meant you had to tour all the local pubs, drink the wine and then write about it. So I thought this is quite fun. And actually the segue into property was completely by chance, because my father was a local estate agent, although he was so pompous he called himself a property consultant, because estate agents had such a bad name. And one day the guy who'd been writing the property column on the paper for about 100 years finally retired, and the editor just shouts across the room, "Bates, your dad's an estate agent, you're writing the property column." And I thought, no more money, just more work. And it used to be a bit cut and paste press releases for whatever houses were being sold. But then I really got into it and sort of started visiting sites where there were new developments going on. And so I created a bit of a niche. So I sort of turned the column, which was really just had been a sort of parking lot for estate agency puffs, into my column, and I sort of personalised it a bit, and it got a bit of in relative terms, a bit of a following. So that was my move into property, and then I got shifts on the Telegraph, doing writing about property on the diary page, etc. And then there was actually a move across to rugby actually at the time, and rugby writing. So I was doing property. I used to follow the rugby correspondent, a chap called John Mason, to the pub at lunchtime.
Where else is rugby journalism done?
Exactly, because that's really what I wanted to do, and he gave me a break, and I started covering rugby for the Telegraph. So I suppose I had a couple of mentors. Certainly my first editor on the Newbury Weekly News, was a hugely supportive, because I actually went off to university, and he said, if I'm editor, when you leave university, you've got a job here. So I sort of knew what I was going to do. And I'd always loved sport. I wasn't very good at playing it, so the next best thing was writing about it. So I moved across into sport and rugby, and then cut long story short, opportunity came up on the property side with a magazine which was then called WhatHouse, which was a consumer magazine. It was on the shelves of Smiths, etc., which was listing new homes. I edited that. But I kept my rugby going, so every weekend I'd be going down to watch, Bath v Bristol or whatever, or going across doing so old, it was Five Nations back then. It was even pre-Italy coming in, so
mid-90s is that?
Yeah, it would have been 90s, because I think Six Nations, I think it was 2000.
Yeah.
And in fact, slightly sort of anecdotal, but it was quite funny when there's talk of Italy joining the Six Nations, they sort of asked rugby journalists about whether they think this would work. And you can imagine the answer. Long weekends on expenses in Rome, bring them in. Yeah. So regardless of whether they can compete, which they now are, it's great.
So they didn't the first few
They certainly
years,
didn't,
did
no, they didn't, no. But
I remember that vividly.
The Rome weekends were great, including taking my now wife. I said, do you fancy a weekend in Rome? Took her to Rome, and I said, I do need to go to the Stadio, whatever it was, for a few hours because I've got to work. So the Valentine's weekend was wrapped around the rugby.
Of course.
Yeah. Sort of, it was February the 14th, Valentine's Day, her birthday, and the rugby. But I didn't tell her until late on that it was all expenses paid because of the rugby. So she could go shopping for a while whilst I covered the rugby. And then on the back of WhatHouse, which was a consumer publication, I saw an opportunity for a B2B magazine, because I got to meet a lot of people in the industry, great people. I thought there wasn't really a sort of people-led publication in the sector. There was your Estates Gazette, your Property Weeks, your specialist construction ones, but nothing about the people. So 30 years ago, launched Showhouse magazine. So,
well, at this point, I'll chuck I'll show it. This is what edition is this? This is the October edition. Last month they come out.
Yes, monthly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
lovely.
Yeah,
beautiful.
Yeah, no. So I mean, that's worked really well, and we've the sort of tagline is where the house building community meets. So we cover all aspects of house building, and there's nothing I like more than interviewing house builders and finding their passion and indeed their backstories are always fascinating as well.
Well, what I want to get, so just on a quick moment, the first day that you were even the T-boy, like what was it like? What were like the smells and the feelings that you had? Now, I mean, everyone has that apprehension of their first job or whatever it is, and maybe it wasn't your first day in your first job, but what your first proper first day for you, what was that like? Because we asked people about that in the construction industry, so I wonder if journalism's any different.
No, I mean, incredibly nervous, because also again back in those days, even though it's a local paper, it was quite a harsh environment, and writing to deadlines and editors shouting across the room, and going out and finding stories, and actually quite often the stories you didn't want to write. There was the worst job was in the morning having to go down, as a sort of young cub reporter, go down and you meet the police every morning to see what's happened overnight, and that could be a horrible road traffic accident or something like that, and then you have to follow up those stories. There's that door knocking, which is horrible. You don't want to do, and I mean, in many ways, I think that sort of moved me across to sort of property and sport, because I just wasn't a sort of door knocker, hard news journalist. I mean, when I was on the paper, we had, and this is late 80s now, we had the Hungerford massacre, which at the time was the biggest mass murder in British history, and that's just down the road from Newbury. So we were covering that. So we were sort of, from doing your flower shows, your golden weddings, your planning committee meetings, we suddenly had this just huge and horrible event. And I think that, obviously, I mean, I grew as a journalist, but it also made me think, I don't think I'm cut out for news. I think I'm too sensitive. I mean, what does too nice mean? But I just realised that I didn't have that edge. And because it was such a massive international story, the world's press descended, and we're a little old local paper, and some of their antics to get stories just made me think, why are you doing that? That's just not right. And so I almost sort of went for the sanctuary of property and sport, which is
that's a funny one, isn't it? Because in those days, I classed that as, this is going to sound really bad, proper journalism. Because what you get now on your phone or wherever is like minute by minute accounts of what's going on, and most of it is speculation.
Yes.
Rather than news. And I find that really frustrating when you go on, I mean, A1 News app, whatever app it is, and you're scrolling and breaking news, this thing might happen. Like, no, that's not news, that's speculation.
Yeah.
But you guys at the time are doing real news, which is actually based in some amount of truth, because you can't necessarily you can't put to print and make it up. Like that's one of the things that newspapers, they're pretty heavily regulated, right? So someone can complain about a newspaper and they get sued. You can't, you complain about an app and they just take it off.
Yes.
And write a little apology at the bottom or whatever, which happens like daily almost, unless you're an international news thing, and we won't go into that either.
But it is. I mean, you're right, and the trouble is, I think newspapers have dumbed down to compete with the social media, and that's what makes me, as a sort of old newspaper man, really big, because we properly regulated. You had sub-editors. You wouldn't dream of putting anything out that didn't answer the who, what, where, how, why. And you're so right, Sam, about the breaking news, and it's this race to be first. Well, it's not even with the news, with the speculation. And I remember someone making a point that on one of the sort of news broadcasts a few years ago, they put out, we're hearing news of a school bus in France that has come off the road. We have no more details. At that moment, every parent with any child on a school trip in France is going, oh my God. Yeah. That to me is irresponsible journalism, just because they want to be the first to say something's happened. We don't know where, we don't know how, we don't know what. And I find that, I just find that so poor. But now when you're competing to be first with the news, not first with the facts.
Well, that is the art of storytelling, isn't it? And storytelling is sort of at the heart of what you do. Now, whether that's storytelling about rugby or whether that's storytelling about actual, like, I say actual news, that means that rugby's not news. But you know what I mean, like everyday news. When did you realise that telling the stories of the people who build homes could shape an entire industry?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it was almost like, because when I came into the house building industry, and actually it's something that sadly hasn't changed, is a poor public perception of house builders and what they build and the people. It's almost as if in house building, profit's a dirty word. And I suppose what immediately frustrated me was, because I was in a fortunate position to interview senior people in the industry, was trying to communicate that passion was absolutely genuine to create great homes and communities. Yes, you get good builders and you get bad builders, and they all want to make a profit. Nothing wrong with that. But I think they've almost been misrepresented in that people don't recognise that they are great people, great ambition, but great passion to create communities. And also I think people forget what an incredibly tough business it is, to be in. People see, you'll get the big stories of the big house builders and the big bonuses, and that obviously doesn't play well. And they're dealing with the biggest purchase in anyone's lifetime, so it's a very emotional thing. But it is, a house is going to go wrong, and sometimes probably the industry is guilty of over-egging the find your perfect home and everything's going to be wonderful, rather than actually some things are out of their control, and they just need to manage expectations a bit better to sort of bridge that gap between reality and perception.
I hadn't thought of that before, actually. The idea that, we do, as house builders, people do it as their perfect home, forever home.
Yeah.
But it's probably not. Like, I don't know exactly what the stats are about people who move house, but I'm sure people, when I was younger, we moved around a lot. Not far, just around the towns that we lived in. I guess people don't do that quite as much nowadays because stamp duty is a bit higher, and
yes.
You get taxed on every time you move,
yeah.
or buy or do anything. So I think people are probably sticking around a bit longer, and I guess maybe that plays into buying your forever home for the first time, because you're probably not turning a profit as much nowadays when you buy a home, especially a new build. Because they are, and rightly so, they are expensive.
Yeah.
And that's difficult to quantify why they're expensive, but they are. Anything is new is expensive. Yes. As soon as you drive your brand new car off the forecourt, you've lost like 15% of it or whatever. And I think it's probably the same with the new build house, right? The first few years, you're definitely not selling it for what you bought it for, because it's not new anymore.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of pressure, isn't there, to buy your perfect home, and that's got solar panels and an electric car charger, and it's, it's insured by this company, and it's, you get your bills free for 5 years, and you get all of these things, and that all puts pressure on house builders. Are they putting that pressure on themselves, or where does that pressure even come from? Or where do you think it started?
I think it's almost like it's a sort of marketing pressure they put on themselves in terms of they try and compare themselves with the car industry, but it's that I think it's that customer care from the start, but actually being, honest, not saying they've been dishonest about it, but that things will go wrong. There will be snags. There might be, delays. If you've bought off plan, so you're making a plan. Oh, right, I'm going to complete in 3 months, 4 months, whatever. But there's been floods. There's been whatever.
It rains for a month.
It rains for a month. Yeah, and quite rightly, the consumer's thinking, you've got my money. This is not on. This is not acceptable. And I think too often house builders just keep their head down rather than, once they've got the customer, just to talk them through. And actually, this is in many ways why I think social media can help, because I think, whether you've, an ability to update them and keep them abreast of how their new home is developing, and even the snags that it hits, I think it would be really cool to, and I know there's health and safety, which you'll know a lot about getting them on sites, but I remember I bought brand new, and that you get that frustration because you'd love to put on the hard hat and come in and almost watch it go up, and it's a bit like you've exchanged, and then it's like, we'll let you know when it's ready. And I think there's real missed opportunity there to quite literally watch it come out of the ground, have a chat with a site manager, and feel, wow, this is taking shape, rather than, okay, they wait until it's almost the ribbon's ready to cut, and you go in, and then yes, it looks all shiny and new, but then you realise there's all sorts of things going wrong when you move in, which, these things happen, but you sort of haven't been told that. You've just assumed that, right, here it is, perfection, and it's cost you a huge amount of money. Well, it's the biggest check you've ever written, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's tied in with emotion. If you're moving, you could be moving for a myriad of reasons, couldn't you, good or bad? So there's emotion. So people, so the customer's going to be on edge, and I just think there needs to be more of a sort of holistic approach to the customer. But I think that is improving. I think sort of customer care within the industry is improving a lot.
Well, customer care is a huge thing now. We do a lot of, as a company, GSQ do a lot of customer care, not just for the people that we've worked for, because as you say, inevitably, people are people and they get stuff wrong, right? Sometimes, and we try our best. Everyone in the industry is trying their best to no one's deliberately cutting corners, because it costs you way more money to go back and fix it than it does at the time.
Yes,
it's just standard procedure. I don't know. I don't think I can't remember what that guy, the Welsh bloke, that goes around. He's like, that's absolutely shocking. That's 15 digestives out of plum, that wall. It's like, every time I see that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's just happened.
Yeah.
But you do see those things. But for you, what has writing about homes taught you about the people who actually build them? Because we've talked about all of these, the issues and the things, but what has it really taught you about the people behind the facade that is put up almost?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because right at the start you said that. I think, as I sort of said, I couldn't lay a brick. I am the most DIY. I am DIY illiterate, and if my wife is listening, she'll be nodding her head, and she's from a family of builders, and I honestly, it's shocking, but actually, that almost plays. That's almost why I enjoy it, because I love the trades, and I love that. But that okay, I'm sure a bricklayer just will take it for granted that they can do it once they've got the skills, etc. But I almost like feed off that incompetency, and I love. I love all the work that goes into it, whether it's a bricklayer, whether it's roof, or whether it's wonderful work surfaces and kitchens, and all that stuff plays in, and then that just reminds you of all the skill sets that do go into construction, and it's I find myself sort of defending it, because I think those skills are underplayed in construction. I think we've got some fantastic trades who do fantastic work. Often against, really tough odds, and so that sort of brings it to the surface. And the most interesting senior executive of house builders are the ones who started there, the ones who can, they can spot something out from 100 yards. And I mean, I'm thinking of the sort of the industry greats who I've been privileged to interview over the years, like the late Tony Pidgley of the Barclay Group, and there was nothing that he couldn't have done himself. So that when he's arriving on site, you can see the panic amongst the site managers, because you're not going to pull any wool over his eyes, and he's going to spot something. And likewise, Steve Morgan, of course, who founded Redrow Homes, out of nothing, and again, just to see their passion, but their knowledge and what they're trying to achieve, and also I suppose it also shows the great career path that to go from a labourer on site. There's no reason. I mean, there's a lot of obstacles in the way, particularly in this day and age. But an opportunity to grow a business. Although having said that, I don't know where the next Pidgley or Morgan's coming from. I think it'd be almost impossible now to start a business from scratch and get to that scale. Would be almost unheard of. But so I'm not sure where the next big businesses are going to come from in terms of creation. Hence, we're seeing all the amalgamation of the big guys, because you can have all the passion, all the entrepreneurial spirit in the world, but to start from scratch and get to sort of, several thousand homes a year, crikey, I don't think that's possible this day and age.
It's really interesting that you say that. Really, really interesting. And I say this is interesting a lot because all of my guests are super interesting. This is off piece. I want to unpack that. The idea that, because we're trying to get a bunch of new people into the industry, and what you've just said almost could put them off. Because, take people that are close to me. I don't sit in the same rooms as you, unfortunately. Not yet, anyway. I mean, hopefully we become pals and you put me into a room somewhere.
Absolutely.
But
we'll see it some rugby games, definitely.
For sure. Yeah. Oh, an aside. I missed out on Ireland, Australia. I think I told you on the phone. I missed out. It was too expensive for me last week. I was in Dublin last weekend. Yeah. It was too expensive. Very frustrating. But I get to sit with builders who are not, they're SMEs essentially. So Gary Staines, my boss, being one, started from nothing. Now, probably going to be 20 million turnover of revenue this year. I've had Lee Marley sat where you are. Maybe you'd know Lee Marley. Have you met? I don't know if you've met him before.
Know of him.
So this will be Lee's £100 million year. First £100 million year. He was a labourer. And then learned to be a bricklayer, in the 80s. Did an apprenticeship. But if that's not possible now, what hope is there for people starting out in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there's scale, because I'm talking people who've absolute legends who have built massive businesses. So I think that they've been hugely successful. I think what I'd love to see is SMEs who can, I don't know, if they start with a couple, then get to 10, and the ability to get to 50, to scale that way. And I think, with all due respect to the big volume players, as we know, we just need more players on the pitch, don't we? And I think, not least for quality, but for choice. And I think that's the other thing as well, that you have perception. Again, on the one hand, you have the volume players who work incredibly hard, built great businesses. Then you have the I always use the analogy of if you built a house, whether it's one house or 100 homes, and as a developer, if you walked into the village pub where you just built and you had your hard hat with your logo on, would the locals buy you a beer or throw a beer over your head? And I think that's often the difference, because I think the SMEs who invariably are building in their community, employing local trades, they would be proud. So they would want to confidently walk into that pub. Whereas, again, there's that perception that, volume, it's come in, knock out the houses, stick your logo on the under-11 football team shirt just to show your community spirit, and then get the hell out of there onto the next one, which again I think is wrong, but that's a perception problem that the industry needs to overcome. And I think you've almost got two different industries. You've got SMEs, and an SME can be quite a big company. It's quite a widespread when we call it SMEs and volume, but they're almost operating on different planets in terms of their ability to procure and to buy land and to move.
Yeah, I think I sort of unpacking that in my mind as you were speaking. I think house building is an old industry, a very, very old industry. So I think maybe there is that. I think maybe that's the point. If you take a look at even a young industry like social media, the media industry, there won't be another Meta or an Alphabet, Google. There won't be another one at that scale, because they've got there. And I guess that's what you're saying. Your Red Rose, there won't be another Red Row, a Barclay, a Bellway. They're not, because the industry is so old. It's very hard to be that big, because you've got all these old players. Look at banking, the oldest industry there ever has been. You've got huge banks. You're never going to be a new bank that gets that big without being one of the people who already owned a bank.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so if
yeah,
someone who
yeah.
owned who used to own a big housing company, starting a new housing company, people are going to be like, well, he did it with them, so we'll invest in that or whatever. But if the labourer who started, like, say I was a labourer at 18, started my own building company when I'm 25, I'm probably not going to be a Bellway. But
Yeah.
I think that's probably okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And as you say, what the difficulty I think is, I guess there's a question in here somewhere. You've got your people who have built big companies from scratch who could do everything on the site. What does that mean for the site agents now who have done a degree in site management and maybe aren't from a trade? I guess this is where you're getting to with have we lost those people? Where have those people gone? How do you see that fitting into the future of what is the house building industry?
Yeah, because I suppose again, Sam, isn't it? We've got the aging workforce as well, which again is a massive issue, and recruitment, and where's the next the next gen coming from, and I think that's that plays again into the whole perception of that industry. How do we promote it as a great business to be in? And but also there are really good career paths, I think, as well. I mean, we've been talking about construction. We're almost literally talking about the bricks and mortar, but there's so much more to it, isn't there? There's sales, there's marketing, there's planning, there's customer care. There's so many different facets that people can go into. So it's not worrying about little Harry getting cold on a wet building site. Actually, if they've got some marketing skills, sales skills, there's so much opportunity out there.
I don't think that's where the skills gap is, though, is it? Because you can't market a house that's not being built by somebody.
No, very
right?
true.
And you can't, so actually, I do. The skills gap is in the people who are actually making the houses. Because I mean, you could almost say you can get a marketeer in from any industry to market a house, or you can. I mean, planning's maybe a bit different, but you get an engineer in from somewhere, and they can probably turn their hand to planning. You can't just say, oh yeah, dear marketer, can you go and actually build that house for me, please?
Yes,
they're not
true.
necessarily going to be able to do that, So
yeah.
that's sort of where I'm getting at, and that's where our skills gap is. The government are saying they want to build 1.5 million houses or whatever it is, and there just are not the people. I could find you. I'll probably find you 1 million people who want to market those houses. But I couldn't find you 1 million people who want to build them.
Yeah.
How do you see that? How do you see the way
well,
forward?
I'm absolutely with you on that. But I suppose it's more again that analogy about sort of the rising tide lifts all boats. That I think if you can convince more people of the value of a house building industry and the wide range of disciplines, and that obviously includes the trades that build them. That maybe there is that. It's almost that team ethic, isn't it? It's about saying I built that or I played my part in that driving past something and proud of it. But also with trades and going back, when I sort of take the mick out of my complete lack of skills, that they are the great life skills, aren't they? I mean, you're always you're always going to use them. They're great trades to have, and whether that's at home, whether that's work, etc. But I would have thought, and again, it goes back to me being super impressed by people who quite literally do lay bricks and that creative process. And I think I would love to be able to do that. I'd really love to be able to do that. And I think it's creating that team environment, because I think you've got so many different subbies and different trades. Are they? Yes, they're literally working towards the same thing, which is creating this house. But maybe internally there's always you probably have more experience than me that there's issues between trades and who did this, who didn't do that, etc., etc. So and because house builders are so reliant on subcontractors, maybe they're not selling it as well as they should in terms of come and help create this new community with us.
Yeah, I think that is certainly a more valuable marketing strategy than Well, I don't.
Oh, but and you can make good money, can't you?
Well, you can. Well, and that's the point, right?
This isn't philanthropic. Isn't come and help us build homes. It's actually you can make good money.
Yeah,
very good money.
Many bricklayers are making more than GPs at this point. Certainly junior doctors. You can train 7 years to be a junior doctor, or you can train 3 years with Site Ready Solutions and start getting paid like 40, 50 grand a year. if you're good at it and if you stick at it and if you really apply yourself, And I think that's where people are sort of maybe missing a trick a little bit. But if we do have a marketing issue for the trades. You arguably spend a lot of your time actually marketing stuff, whether that be, one of the many publications that you direct and edit, or whether that be other people. If I gave you the task of marketing to people to join the industry, and I'm not necessarily talking just like right now. If I gave you free reign of a strategy of recruiting and marketing, starting from birth, what would that maybe look like for you? I've never asked this to anyone before. But I'm interested. You've been in the industry for a long time, in and around the industry, and you speak to a lot of people. So I'd be interested to know what.
Yeah, I
won't hold you to it either.
No. But actually, what I go back to Site Ready Solutions. What I love is that mentoring aspect, and I think we need more of that. A few years ago, we did a round table which was labelled sort of master and apprentice, and we literally in one room we had the CEO of big house builders and a bright young apprentice prospect, and that was fascinating because got them to sort of bounce off each other, but at the same time it was showing the apprentice what obviously could be achieved, and I think we definitely need more of those. I think people are so, we're all guilty of it. You're so wrapped up in what you've got to do that we almost forget the next generation, and I think that's something that's changed. Going back to when I started on the Newbury Weekly News, you're almost naturally mentored, whereas now everybody just hasn't got the time. I mean, I know there's some companies are really good at it. Whether they've got apprentices or graduate trainees, that there's a proper structure and career development, which is great. But I wonder whether people at the top of their trades, you almost should absolutely make more time for the younger people, and that in itself is a marketing exercise, isn't it? Because they learn from someone to aspire to, and I'd love to see more of that. The number of interviews I've done, I'm thinking actually if whilst interviewing that person, if there are a dozen kids in that room, I know that they would take a lot out of it, not necessarily because I'm some brilliant interview, but it was just by the nature of what you're discussing. They're going, hang on, this is really interesting, and I think there should definitely be more of that.
It's hard in an output business though, isn't it? But like a direct output business, like bricklayers, for example, get paid for how many bricks they lay. So if you're getting paid per brick, why, how am I going to have time? And this is the age-old argument, and this is where maybe in your conversations with tier ones who, and that not that they want the same thing, but they also have shareholders who want their 2 pennies worth because of the 2 pennies worth to put in,
Absolutely.
They want their, they want their pound of flesh. And if you've got a lot of shareholders who want a pound of flesh, that's a lot of pounds. And actually that, unfortunately it seems in the industry that it is almost a race to the bottom, at the bottom. Whereas it's not necessarily at the top of the pyramid. That's sort of a difficult one to get your head around, because what we're essentially saying is, well, Dave Barry the bricklayer has got to mentor the next, Billy the bricklayer, who's going to be next, but they still have to lay all the bricks that we need them to lay, and we're still only going to pay them the same as what we're going to pay them. And, from the top all the way down, that's never going to change, because Barry still needs to earn his money to pay his wage, pay his way in the world. And how is he ever going to teach Billy when he's got to earn his wage? Unless up the pyramid, there's more money given, and then it goes up and there's a bit more, and then it goes up and there's a bit more. So it actually does filter down. And I'm not against people making money. I'm for people making money. Bricklayers work really hard. I want them to make as much money as they can, 100%. But how do you, or can you make that a conversation that comes up somewhere? Because that is a difficult square to round.
It is, and also, and it maybe because it's my sort of age, that actually I probably should be thinking of some really cool stuff to do via social media. And actually, I know that, like the bricklaying, it's great. I think some of the guys get lots of hits because they're creating really cool content, and I think that that content creation can really help. And also, just again anecdotally, a builder mate of mine just the other day was saying how his daughter, teenage daughter, wasn't really quite sure what she wanted to do post GCSEs, was not really happy at college, and he said, well, I literally need a bit of help. So she literally went out and almost hodcasting or hod carrying in that sense. And he said actually she'd never thought of it before, and she said, I'll help Dad, give me a bit of money. And actually it's really interesting because she's loving it and actually thinking this industry could be for me. And he said it was fantastic, obviously, at two levels. A, that found it interesting. B, that they spend more time talking, and he probably learned more about his daughter out there, out there building stuff than he ever did before. And I suppose you've still got, I suppose, family influences if they see that opportunity. But how do you go to a completely new set of people and saying, do you realise, what construction is, the career paths, what you can earn, and the job satisfaction you can get out of it. So I think it's a massive PR job. It's not going to close that gap entirely, but I don't think the industry does really well in spite of its public profile, not because of. And I find that really frustrating.
Who pays for that though? Like who actually? Because is it a governmental PR strategy? Is it house builders? Who is it? Is it the CITB? Is it the NHBC? Who actually pays for that stuff? Because at the moment, it's SMEs.
Yes.
Like, really?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It is the SMEs who are in that industry anyway. You have tier ones taking on apprentices all the time, and one of your good friends, Andy Hill, are actually really good at taking on management apprentices. They almost have one on every site. We do a lot of work with Hill, and I mean, in fact, Bellway do it pretty well as well. We do a lot of work with those sort of companies, and they're pretty good at putting management apprentices in. But the actual closing of a gap is done generally by the SMEs, and they're generally not paid very well for, if at all, for it. And they have to really love it. Like Gary really genuinely, I had an hour conversation with him this morning from about 6:45 a.m. Talking about it. And the fact that we're speaking about it at that time of the morning says that we love it.
Yes.
And that we want to make a difference, and that he's investing his own money into things like a podcast, into things like site-ready solutions, into things like, into various other, working with people in prisons and working with people, with mental health problems and all sorts of different stuff.
Yeah.
At the moment, we don't necessarily win more work because of that.
No.
Maybe we should.
Yeah.
But again, as you say, or as I say, it's the race to the bottom.
Yeah.
But how do you as a, I mean, yours is sort of a business to business magazine, if you will.
Yes. Yeah.
But how do we do that because it's not popular. You put that in your magazine. That's not a popular topic to talk about, is it?
No. But I think a huge issue, and obviously the politics comes into it. Everything is like in these 5-year cycles with governments and whatever. And it's amazing how everybody recognises there's a housing crisis and recognise how important house building is, and that's why it needs more backing, in the sense, because it's not just providing the shelter. It's so important socially as well, environmentally, socially, economically. The economic levers. It starts with houses and house building, doesn't it? And everything that, and it's not just the trades that build them. It's then if people are moving house, if they're buying kitchens, for every I can't remember the stats, but yeah, for every house built is creating X times jobs. It's helping local shops, it's helping local communities, and it's getting that across, which is. But against always against a political backdrop. Yes, of course you need regulations. Of course you need planning. But planning is it's the most dysfunctional system ever imagined, and it's not getting any better.
It's because it's done by committee. It's
yes.
really annoying.
Well, actually, I said this at the WhatHouse Awards last week, that with all due respect to local councils, you actually got amateurs in charge of probably the biggest decisions that communities can make, and you've got professional planning officers just tearing their hair out because hopefully they're making informed decisions only for, I think I referred to Mrs. Miggins, great pie maker, rubbish placemaker, thinking, don't want houses there, that's where I walk my dog. That's and honestly, that almost goes all the way back to the Newbury Weekly News. I used to have to sit on Wednesday night planning subcommittee meetings, and obviously I'm far more sort of informed than I was back then. Back then I was just looking at my watch, wondering if I could make last orders. But you would hear the spurious sort of one-eyed arguments, against development they were just absurd, and that hasn't changed. And it's almost democracy gone mad, in my opinion, because the argument being, it's local people making local decisions. I get it, but I'm sorry, everyone's a NIMBY at heart, so you cannot divorce that. You need to take that out of the equation, and you need proper expertise and proper, structural change. You'd get for every. I always use this sort of analogy of if someone's building new homes, edge of a village. It's always a protest. The front page of any local newspaper, isn't it? It's not. It's uproar as X builder gets planning for 100 homes. It's not great news for local community and first-time buyers as X gets planning. The placard wavers are the comfortable middle-aged in their comfortable house, saying no new homes in our village. We can't cope. There'll be more traffic. There'll be more pressure on school places. Meanwhile, their 38-year-old son is still in the attic room with absolutely not a chance in hell of moving out anytime soon. It just needs joined up thinking. Obviously, it's a sort of, you need a national housing service, don't you? And even then, we're talking that sort of, we're talking in a sort of first world problem, but actually got to go lower down the rung. Affordable housing and in poverty and poor conditions, etc. Housing is just, the number one issue of our time, but is a political football. It's the only house building is one of the few industries that's actually artificially deprived of its basic raw material, which is permissioned land. Yeah. So that is a political decision. If you're Willy Wonka and you've got a chocolate factory you want to expand, you can buy as much cocoa as you like if you've got the funds for it. But it's a crazy, crazy world, and it hasn't changed in the time I've been involved in it.
No. I don't know what I don't know what the answer is, and we can talk about that forever, like literally forever.
Yes,
because that will be an age-old problem, and eventually we will run out of land, and we will, and we'll recycle, and and that's happening now. You take an old army barracks and build a housing estate on it. That's locally where I live. That's the plans. Take an old school and build some houses on it. And people hate it. It's like, well, if the school's not working, the residential centre that I used to run in Audley End, beautiful, Grade 1 listed Tudor building. They're now planning to put 5-6 houses on the site, which is absolutely devastating. It devastates me to think about it. But someone's going to live there.
Yes.
And what do we do with it otherwise? Like I was talking with my brother-in-law actually yesterday. Like, we should have just bought it. It's only sold for like $1.5 million. The thing is huge. It's got like 15 bedrooms, and it's sold for $1.5 million, or maybe 2 million max. Like, you can't buy a 4-bed on the high street in Saffron Walden for £1 million.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? But to be able to, the work that has to go into that, and someone's going to live there, and that's sort of the point. House builders aren't just building houses for the sake of building houses and making money. They're there to build houses for the people who want to live in them, because people want to live in houses. I'd love to be able to move to a bigger, nicer house. I love my house. I love the area that I live in.
Yeah.
It's a lovely, I live on a housing estate, and it is a lovely housing estate. And I don't have any problem with people building on where I am, because my house was built in the late 60s.
Yeah.
And it's not due, and, it's not due being bulldozed and rebuilt anytime soon.
Yeah.
But there are some fields out the back, which they could build on or whatever. But actually, it keeps me in a job, and there could be some initiative where we do building, and it starts in reception, it's in school, and makes it acceptable throughout all of the school, because you cut all sorts of stuff from like DT, design technology, all that stuff and that, rightly so, it's being moved to computer-aided design and AI design and all that stuff, and that's great.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to stand outside on a cold January and get wet and dirty and horrible, and get to make something.
Well, you're right, and you're right. Actually, I mean, as you say, with primary school, when you think about it, what's the most popular toy in history is Lego.
Yeah,
it's building, isn't it? And you go to a primary school, and outside, and people naturally do that, and yet, and somehow it's. I mean, I remember there was a survey that, no disrespect to hairdressers, but there was a list of sort of trades. So again, it goes back into schools in terms of, are they encouraging people into house building? And I think so. Hairdressing came above house building in terms of which is fine. But just going back to careers fairs and jobs, whatever, are people selling it? Again, go back to Steve Morgan, the founder of Redrow. The story is. Of when he was kicked, and he'd be the first to admit this, but he got sort of kicked out of school, and the parting shot from his headmaster as he was kicked out of Hull was, Morgan, if you don't pull your socks up, you'll end up working on a building site. Well, that didn't work out too bad, did it? For the but again, why
would that? Why is that a slur?
Why is that a slur?
Yeah.
Exactly. Why is that a slur? It's it's frankly outrageous. But I suspect I'm not privy to careers officers, but I suspect that, oh, go on, be a lawyer, be an accountant.
People haven't worked out that those jobs are going to be gone pretty soon.
Yes,
AI will be you will have AI lawyers. You don't need a lawyer so much. You don't need to know law. I mean, you do in really specific cases of law. You need to know law, but general law, I could type that into ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, whatever I want.
Yes.
Tell me all about the housing law. Well, housing law has all been written. It's all on the internet.
Yes.
So if it's all on the internet, a large language model can tell you about it.
Absolutely.
It might not be 100% correct, but it's going to be 99.9% there. So your lawyer job is probably out the window in 10 years, maybe.
Yeah.
We're not going to have self-building houses in 10 years. I can tell you that for free.
No.
Or self-electricians or whatever. Almost certainly, maybe in 50 years. All right.
Yeah,
if we
yeah,
carry
yeah.
on going on this trajectory.
No, absolutely.
Well, awards. The WhatHouse Awards were last Friday, as we record. You've been involved in awards for a very long time, and we won't talk about how long. But in your view, what makes a winner?
Gosh, what makes a winner? I think a lot of things. I mean, there's obvious things: quality of build, quality of design, which but then that can be considered quite subjective. But it's the layers on top of that for the big winners in terms of innovation, in terms of customer care. Also, which also gets overlooked a lot, is staff care, because it's very easy to pump out. We do this for the customer. We offer X. We offer Y. We handhold. We do this, whatever. But I think it's really, really important what they do for their own staff and employees. I think, it's difficult. I mean, we have so many categories. So it can anything from best exterior design, best interior layout, best apartment. There's lots of categories, but the big overall winners and the great thing we have is that it can be, it might be Arsenal v Stevenage. It's not. We don't make that distinction. So the small guys just as much chance as the big guys. Some of the entries are fascinating, and sometimes you think you don't shout enough about this. You're putting what you do in an award submission. Have you told? Have you
the local people
that
you're
the
building
local
around,
people what you're doing? Yeah, and also stuff they do, and that brings another point, doesn't it? The whole sort of Section 106 and what house builders contribute, which you could argue, yes, they should, but again, it's a funny old business world, isn't it? When incentives are, if you could do this for us, do that for us. It's almost as if they're not thinking of the primary purpose, which is we need good quality housing in the area. It's like, well, if we give you that, then we get the roundabout upgraded, or they can build a new classroom at the school and all that sort of stuff, which I get if you're bringing a sizable new community in, all that infrastructure is absolutely paramount. But again, it's that. I'm sorry, going a bit off your question, but it's that everything is so adversarial and that just doesn't help. You want to partner with great local builders to create. I hope I would, not just because the industry I write about, but I don't know, if I was a local councillor or stuff, I think I'd make it my absolute mission to partner with the best local house builders and work with them to create something, not just put down the obstacles and get them on a technicality, or we need another archaeological survey because I know King Harold may or may not have passed through here in.
But that all comes down to money, though, right? The local council want the most money for the land that they have.
Yeah.
So who's going to pay them the most money for the land that they have? Probably the biggest company.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, they're not going to be a local builder. Your Red Rose
No.
anyone. Your Barrett David Wilson, Red Rose, whoever it is, are not. They're national names, not local builders necessarily. And local builders, as we've said already, is Harry the hod carrier is not going to be building necessarily building a big enough local business to service the local area necessarily.
No.
And it's such a boom or bust business. They go bust a lot.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're we haven't got time to talk about all of the connotations of what happens, or the ramifications of what happens if one of the big house builders goes bust.
God forbid.
Because we don't have the infrastructure for that anymore. We don't have insurance companies for that, or banks that have got enough money, or we're in a big recession. If David Wilson Redrow went under, we'd be in a big recession in this country probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard because the council want to.
But also say I don't know what the HBF put out a figure. I can't remember off the top of my head. But also their councils are sitting on these contributions and doing nothing with it. I mean, that's scandalous. And that, and you know, in terms of, you know, what they're doing with that money, or, you know, what it should be ring fenced for. You know, the whole thing is, it's just not joined up. It's just not joined up.
No, and I would love to. Hopefully, maybe we'll get you back in next year and we can talk a bit more about how we join that up. But you know winners. So what we've talked, like, what qualities do they have? You've just had a whole bunch of plethora of winners. Yeah. What is the same between all of them? What qualities are there that run?
I think it's from the top down. I think the quality of the leaders, absolutely, they as individuals, and if that flows down through the workforce, I think it's their standards, it's their refusal to accept second best, which again I don't think chimes enough with the public about how hard they work, and actually what we find with the WhatHouse Awards have been going 45 years, and I think what's great is that I think they have genuinely helped push up the standards, because people are looking to build award-winning homes. The number of times that I've been out on some sites quite sort of early doors, and they're saying, this is absolutely, in 2 years' time, whatever, is going to absolutely clean up at your awards, because we're doing this, we're doing that. And I love all that, because it means that I'm not saying they're not trying on every site and they're going to ignore a mediocre site, but I love that. And I think it's when it permeates through the company. Again, on Friday, some of the best the best moments are seeing particularly the SMEs celebrating, just going wild, because sometimes you get some who are like, okay, yeah, well, we've won, and they go up and they take their award and sit down, and then you get other tables that just go loopy, and I love it. And that just shows it's not just because it's a plaque on a wall, and you know what they're all doing is that they're immediately on their phones, you know, back to the office, back, you know, appreciating that, you know, whilst okay, the senior guys might get all the plaudits and get up on the stage and drink the champagne, but they know the best ones, A, they'll have a mix of people on their table because they realise everybody contributes, but B, the first thing they do is absolutely get on the phone. We had one winner, I think I mentioned Fernham Homes, and Sean Ellis couldn't make the awards, and he was driving. He obviously had no idea. They have no idea they won. He was driving back from the Cotswolds because he said, "Oh, well, I'll meet with you guys afterwards." And they told me afterwards that they actually almost did a live stream. I hasten to add, he wasn't driving; he was in the back of a car. But they literally did the live stream of and the winning moment, and you know, you can imagine it's a bit like those football things when the phone goes all shaky because they're all going absolutely mad, and Sean was saying, my God, it just went, you know, I lost them, and then you had pictures from the floor and the wine and whatever. But I love that because it, you know, and some, again, obviously it's very much an industry and trade event, but you almost want a wider audience to see what this means, and it's not because, you know, it's not because they've literally won for the quality of the work that they've done. And all the trades as well. I would hope that they would absolutely, you know, send out a letter or a missive to absolutely everybody who contributed to that home or that development. And I remember ages ago having this idea that this is almost like pre-social media, that actually when you finish a development and you've got something on a screen, almost like, you know, at the end of a film, you go from second boom operator all the way to producer and director. Yeah. And if you just credited every person on that, because everybody played a part in that, literally from the ground up, and I think that would just create that sense of pride.
Well, I'm hopefully going to start making videos about developments. So right. I would actually like to put all of that on the credits at the end, which I think would actually be a really cool thing.
Yeah,
have people watching the credits to see them.
Yeah. And not only that, but also to the public again. My God,
all of those people. There's 5 minutes of credits running through
absolutely.
this. You know,
That is a lot to come together, so-called seamlessly, and maybe make them understand. You can see how occasionally it goes a little bit wrong, and I think it would be, and it would show the wide number of opportunities as well.
Well, I've got 3 last things for you. We talked about the leaders of the companies. What are the themes or anxieties that these leaders are talking to you about that they're not talking about publicly? And I don't want you to name names, but I want you to sort of pull back the curtain a little bit, because I know that you have more frank conversations with people than most.
Yes, I mean, again, going back to the awards, and it's a house building industry event, so a drink or two may get taken towards the end of it. Towards the end of the afternoon, actually, because it's a lunchtime event, or early evening, the conversations get quite frank, and actually, but this year, I was, I don't know, almost more worried than ever. There was a lot of the SMEs, and they won awards, and it was like they were clutching those awards and saying, not in a overly emotive way, but saying, you don't know how much this means, because this has just been the year from hell, and we think next year is going to be another year from hell, and we don't know what to do, because it comes back to what it's saying, because they're butting up against stuff they can't do anything about. They can build the best quality, they can try and acquire the land, they can try and get the planning, but there's so many things out of their control, and that wasn't just the SMEs, but the some of the bigger players were actually. It was almost like bittersweet, because they're thinking, well, this is a great day, and I'm not advocating drinking to forget, but it got to that end of the evening where they were determined to enjoy themselves while it lasted, but knowing on the Monday morning they're going to look at their figures and the numbers.
Yeah, their P&L sheet is not going to be good either.
No.
And it's interesting that you when you put it that way, because that could be the last award they ever win.
Yes.
Or it could be the last award ceremony they're ever at.
Yes.
Certainly if they're an SME, because it lets you get battered.
Yeah.
Absolutely battered by everybody.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. I mean, and big house builders are too.
Yes.
And your average, Barry the bricklayer is getting battered on, he has to do his tax return 5 times.
Yeah.
Starting this year, because we're making tax digital, which is great. But also very much an aside.
Well, that's it, isn't it? It's a moment. It's the head, and you get the headlines: 1.5 million new homes. Everybody in the industry knows. From day one, that was cloud cuckoo land. It's even less so. It's almost got backwards, and so every time it seems another obstacle is thrown down, which just frustrates the hell out of a business that can't. Yeah, you can only do so much. You can't pivot, because you've still got to buy the land, you've still got to get planning. There's no way around that. You've still got regulations, it's incredibly tough.
Well, what is one idea that you'd want every person listening to take away from your journey?
Gosh, from my journey,
that might help them.
Yeah, from a very personal point of view rather than an industry point of view, I think I've been so fortunate in that from the word go, I've done something I love. I've always loved writing, and I think that's. It's easy to say when you've done it, and people don't necessarily get that choice. But that old adage about do something you love, and I absolutely love the writing. I love the people, and I think it's people probably more than anything else. I think sometimes it's been a harsh old world out there. It's been really tough for people, but it's actually just a reminder there's just great people, and talk to people. We're coming back, we know with construction and mental health, but mental health per se, or just talking. And I'm fortunate that my job means that I have to talk to people, but it's not a chore at all, because I love it. And actually, this has been fascinating, because the sort of tables reversed. It's normally me putting the questions, and it's great because it does make you think, because it's easy for me talking about an industry publication putting the obvious questions to house builders, but rather like you, it's actually about digging beneath and the people behind that. But that still informs the magazine because it makes you realise what they're doing it for, and make money. Well, nothing wrong with that, but there are reasons beyond that, and they're huge pressures. Whether you're the boss of a big PLC, you might see the big bonuses, the big salaries, but geez, there's a lot of pressure, and they work damn hard. There's very few people who don't deserve it.
Well, our final closing tradition question: if you could pick the next guest for the Hodcast, who would you put in your chair?
Gosh, next guest. Well, I mean, as I say, I've been fortunate that I've, alongside my property and house building writing, I've done a lot of sport and rugby in particular. And I think someone who would encapsulate everything, because he's done it all. He's been on the chase. He's a chippy back in the amateur days of rugby. Would probably be Jason Leonard, former England prop, Lions, Harlequins legend.
My dad's favourite rugby player in the world.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Well, there you go. You got a guaranteed audience, haven't you? but actually, I've known Jason a long time. Covering him, obviously during his career. A wonderful quote. It wasn't mine. It was a great rugby writing mate of mine, Robert Kitson, the Guardian rugby correspondent, said Jason Leonard was the player who managed to go from amateur to professional without letting go of his pint. And I think that sums up the guy, because also Jason, everybody sees in the fun bus and whatever, but my God, crossing that white line, there was no more focused rugby player ever, and people forget that because they see the fun bus. And actually, he's been to a few of our WhatHouse awards in the past. I once shared. We sort of badged it as a TARDIS, but it was actually a Portaloo on a Dagenham building site. And this was for a WhatHouse Awards piece, and actually it was about skill shortages. So we did this interview on this site, and we were there in our hard hats, and the videographer said, right, what you're going to do is you're going to walk into the Portaloo, and that Portaloo is going to transport, Doctor Who style, to the stage of the Grosvenor House Hotel. But like a lot of videographers and whatever, it's take one, take two, whatever. And Jason's quite wide. I'm not that slim, and I don't know how many takes.
Both of you in there.
Both of in this single Portaloo. And first time it's quite funny and have a bit of a laugh, and Jason's always a bit of a laugh, but at about ninth time of asking, we've done it, and Jason came up with this immortal line, because this was in 2000. This is the awards 2004, the year after they won the Rugby World Cup. So hence we wanted him on stage, and we just came up with this crazy idea. Jason goes, he says, Rupert, a year ago we lifted the Rugby World Cup in Sydney. He said, a year on, said Martin Johnson is at a luxury 7-star hotel in Dubai giving rugby coaching. Johnny Wilkinson has just signed a massive clothing contract. He said, I'm in a Portaloo in Dagenham with you. Where did it all go wrong?
That would... I imagine he has like some of the best stories.
He has the very best, and also we have this annual rugby writers dinner, and again Jason would quite often be there, and he was once asked on stage. He said, obviously Jason, you've great fun, absolute legend, lots of stories to work, but how has there never ever been any bad publicity about you? Or, I mean, we were saying this in the car earlier about stories or gotcha moments, which you get a lot now, obviously in sport, particularly football. And he said because, and he looked it looked like he was staring at me. He was certainly staring at a lot of the journos. He said, because for everything they've got on me, I've got at least 3 on them. So it was like this omerta, this unwritten rule, what goes on, it literally is what goes on tour, stays on tour. And that was a lovely media relationship as well, which sadly you don't get so much these days.
And he's built like a tank.
Well, exactly. Yes, yes. If you got a gotcha tabloid headline and you saw him at the Stoop the following week, you know he's going to win that.
Absolutely. Well, Rupert, thank you so much for taking the time to come and have a conversation. I've loved every single moment of this. You are one of the nicest, one of the most fascinating people who we've spoken to.
Oh,
so
that's
thank
very
you so
kind,
much.
Sam. No, thank you. No, thank you very much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Bless you. Well, I couldn't let you go. We haven't talked enough about barbecues.
No.
I wanted to talk way more about barbecues because barbecue, fire food and outdoor living is the best magazine that you do, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
I mean, you do lots of other publications, but this is my favourite. And when did these come out? So this is winter. This is quarterly, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a quarterly magazine, and that was born out of lockdown when everybody had to cook at home, and I realised there was no real media in that space. But actually, there's a lot of crossover with house building. It's actually creating that outdoor space. So it's not just the cooking, it's the outdoor dining, entertaining. And actually house builders have woken up to that because traditionally they've not been particularly good with their gardens because they can get another house on it.
That would make me want to buy a new build. If it had an open skillet or something outside,
Yes.
I'd be there.
Yeah.
I would literally be there. We're not sponsored by any of the publications that you provide, but this one I love. And if you get the winter edition, you get a free calendar, which gives you, what is it? This gives you a recipe.
So you got a
calendar of barbecues and recipes.
Yeah, so you got a recipe a month.
Wow.
Because we do advocate barbecue 365. Don't put the turkey on the barbecue.
Chefs in here as well. Nick Hook. Oh my
We've got lots of chefs.
I love that. Love that. Well, thank you. Thank you again for coming on, but thank you for my magazine. More importantly,
I want to see pictures of your turkey on the barbecue on Christmas Day.
Absolutely.
Not in the internal oven.
Boxing Day.
You do a Boxing Day?
Boxing Day's barbecue day. Yeah.
Okay.
Boxing Day barbecues.
Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect.
So I'll have to pick one out of the calendar now. But no, thank you so much for coming on.
No, Sam, thank you so much for having me. Thank you.